welcome to another tutorial. My name is Tanmay Bakshi, and this time we're going to be going over how you can use Twilio in order to allow a Watson conversation chatbot to communicate with your users. So let's jump right in today. Now to begin, first of all, Robert, one of my subscribers called Robert, actually sent in this question. And basically he emailed me and asked, how can we create a Watson conversation chatbot that can basically converse with, I guess you could say users, through SMS or through text message. And so I immediately replied to him and said, well, you can use Twilio for that. Now, I've actually been planning a video like this for quite some time, and now I'm finally creating it. So today, I'll show you how you can use Twilio, which is this set of, I guess you could say, telecommunications APIs that you can use in order to do things like SMS, calling, VoIP, and more. But today, we're going to be focusing on the SMS API and integrating it with IBM Watson. So without any further ado, let me talk a little bit about what this will actually do. To begin, this chatbot, this example chatbot, is actually an ice cream sundae ordering chatbot. It'll help you order your ice cream sundaes. The parameters for this chatbot are, of course, the size of your sundae, the flavor, which can be chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry, whether or not you want nuts, and whether or not you want a cherry on top of your ice cream sundae. And that's what Watson Conversation will try and do for you. Now, let's talk a little bit about how Twilio and your phone will integrate with this pipeline. So to begin, there are going to be quite a few different areas of this application. So let's actually draw out a few boxes here, and these boxes will represent every sort of part of this application. And so there are actually quite a few parts here, and this is actually a pretty simplified explanation of what's going on. There is actually a little bit more going on here, actually quite a bit more technically. But basically, the point is that this is the bare inner working of this service here. So, let me just speed this up. Alright, so as you can see, these are basically the main parts of our application. Now let's basically label these parts. So now, of course, this application has actually been coded in Node.JS. So the very heart of our application resides in Node.JS. Now, Node.js is actually running an Express server on port 3000 on top of an Ubuntu server. Okay, then what we're going to do is, this is our heart, okay? This controls everything, this does all the orchestration. But in order to be able to get input, the server needs some sort of method for that. And so Twilio is how we will receive input from the user via their text message. And this is also how we will send them their output via text message. But of course, we have to have some person's phone in order to be able to send and receive SMS messages. So now these are basically the main building blocks of our application: the phone, Twilio, the server, but of course we cannot forget Watson Conversation, which actually makes this all possible. So Watson Conversation. Okay. So now, how do these parts integrate with each other? Well, let me explain. So basically, the way this application flows is that you, via your phone, go ahead and send to Twilio an SMS. Once Twilio receives this SMS, it'll be sent as an HTTP request to my server. So, you know what, actually, in order to make sure that you can really see this better, I could just draw this in different colors, but it's alright. So for now, let's just continue like this. So, we've got Twilio that sends an HTTP request to our Node.js server. Now what's happening here is the server will then, of course, send that to the process that's listening on port 3000, which is Node.js. And Node.js, what it's going to go ahead and do is it will actually take this request and it'll try to find out who sent this text message and what they said in that text message. Once Node.js has that piece of information, it's able to send that text message that you sent to Twilio, and it's able to send that text over to Watson Conversation. So what Node.js goes ahead and does is Node.js will actually send, yet again, an HTTP request over to Watson Conversation. Okay, so now once Watson Conversation has this HTTP request, Watson Conversation will then go ahead and, of course, do its conversation stuff, its machine learning stuff, and try and understand what to reply back to the user. And once it knows what it needs to give back to that user, it's going to send an HTTP response to the Node.js server. So we're going to say that Watson Conversation over here, is sending an HTTP response. So HTTP, response. Okay, so this is an HTTP response that is being sent back to Node.js. Now, once Node.js has that final information, we're able to send that back to the user via SMS. But in order to send that SMS, the Node.js server needs to use Twilio. And so the Node.js server will then go ahead and contact Twilio separately in order, and of course this will actually be an HTTP request. And then Twilio will send an SMS right back to you with that Watson Conversation response. Now this is actually quite interesting how this all works, but there's one, I guess you could say, challenge that we have to work around with when we're working with something like this. Something where you have an input device over here, you have a means of getting this input to the core, okay? So if you, in order to explain what I'm about to tell you, let's just abbreviate both of these blocks into one block. This is an input block, this is the orchestration block, and this over here is our conversation block, our machine learning block, our Watson block, I guess you could say. And so basically the point here is that the server needs to have some way of differentiating between different input blocks. And by this I mean basically, let's just say you've got two phones or two separate users around the world that are accessing the same Twilio client in order to access this entire pipeline. What's going to happen is, let's just say they're both ordering sundaes. We don't want their orders to get mixed up. We don't want them to get merged. And so we need to have some way to tell Watson Conversation that the context variables between this phone and, let's just say, another phone that, if we were to draw here, is completely different. So if I were to have, let's say, another phone over here, maybe, basically the point is that Watson needs to know that these are entirely, so Watson needs to know that these are entirely separate entities here. They're not talking about the same sundae, they're talking about their own individual ice cream sundaes. And the only way we can do that is by doing a little bit of magic with the Node.js code. And so basically what I've gone ahead and done is the Node.js code will basically try and, every single time you send a text message, the first time you send a text message, Node.js has never seen this phone number before. And what's going to happen is it'll understand that, okay, this is a new phone number, and it won't really do anything about that. What it's just going to do is it's going to tell Watson that, okay, we're starting a new conversation entirely, and so it's going to send your SMS or text message over to Watson. And then when Watson returns a response, Watson, in its JSON response, doesn't just send the intents, the entities, and what it wants to say in terms of dialogue, it also returns a context variable. And this contains things like the conversation ID and details about the conversation itself. In fact, you can find out more about the context variable on on another video that I've created about Watson Conversation and how you can use its context variable. And there will be a link to that down in the description below, and so that's going to be very interesting if you haven't heard that already. But basically, right as Watson returns that context variable to us, I store that along with your phone number in an array of context variables. And I do that for every single phone number. And whenever Twilio tells me that a specific phone number has just sent a request to IBM Watson, I'll find that context variable for that phone number that was updated last, and I'll actually send that to Watson so that it knows to continue in that dialogue flow just as it would if it were just continuing to talk with that specific person, so that it knows which conversation I'm actually talking about. Now that might seem a little bit more complicated, but it won't, because now we're about to get into the code part where I will explain how this all works in much more detail. And of course, not just that, I'm going to be telling you how this actually works from the code side. But just before we get into the code, I'd like to show you a quick demo of the application itself. So why don't we just head right over to my two phones here, and then we'll be able to order 2 ice cream sundaes at once without any merging of the orders in between. So that should work out. So without any further ado, before we get into the code part, let's go over to my two phones here, where we can actually try out this chatbot through Twilio and SMS. Let's get to that. So, welcome back to the demo part, and now I'm going to be showing you an actual example of how this chatbot can be used. So as you can see here, I've got 2 phones ready to send messages, and on my Mac over here, I've SSH'd into my server, and I have run this Node.JS application, and so basically, we've got this Node.js application, which is hosting a server on port 3000, as I said, and it's going to be doing all the orchestration for this application. So let's actually begin by saying that this is our phone, where we're going to start off by saying hello, and here we can start off by saying hi. I'm going to send both of these messages, first on this phone and first on this one. Okay, I've sent both of these messages, and as you can see, I've instantly got a reply on this one that says, hello, my name is Watson, and I can help you order an ice cream sundae. What size would you like today? Okay, so as you can see, it has responded to me, and now what I'm able to do is I'm able to reply. But the thing is, if you see over here, I also got a reply here. Now, the reason this one got it later is not because of the fact that this is, of course, it's not because of the fact that the Node.js application prioritized this one second because it sent it later. It's not because of that. It's just because the network on this one's not as nice as this one. So just ignore how this one's a little bit slower. That one doesn't matter. However, let's continue. So, over here, it asks me what size of an ice cream sundae I'd like. So let's just say I don't know what sizes are available. This is my first time coming over here. So I say, what are my options? Okay, I send this message, but over here I say, oh, I've been here a million times. How about a medium? Okay, so over here, Watson tells me over here, though, that you can have a small, medium, or large sundae. Okay, oh, never mind. Okay, so now I can actually tell it which size I like. But over here on this phone, it says, sure, medium sundae it is. What flavor would you like? Before we tell it what flavor, let's tell it what size. So, over here, on the first phone, let's just say I was to say, I don't know, maybe a large sundae, please. Okay, as you can see, Watson should reply with, sure, large sundae it is. What flavor would you like? Now, it's asking me what flavor I'd like, so let's just say, of course, over here, it knows the flavors. Or, you know, the person who's using this chatbot knows all the flavors, knows what the flavors are. So he's going to say, oh, I don't know, maybe a strawberry. Okay, so he's going to send this message. And so Watson says, great, strawberry sundae it is. Would you like nuts on your sundae? But just before we answer that, let's switch over to user number 2. And over here, Watson is asking for the flavor. So let's just say that this person really likes chocolate. So he's going to say, or maybe he just doesn't know what the options are. So he says, what flavors are available? Or maybe, yeah, so what flavors are available? And then Watson says, any second now, it'll say, you can have a chocolate, strawberry, or vanilla sundae. So now let's just say that user number 2 prefers vanilla. So he says, I'd like a vanilla sundae, please. And Watson, of course, accepts this request. And in just a moment, Watson should say, great, vanilla sundae it is. Would you like nuts on your sundae? So let's just say that user number 2, you really like sundaes. So he says, please add those nuts. Or please, yeah, or let's just say, yes, I want the nuts. Sorry, nuts. Okay. So Watson says, in just a moment, it should reply with, all right, nuts on the sundae, a cherry on top. And so let's just switch over back to user 1, though. And user 1 now says that, no, I don't want nuts. Okay, so I send that text message. And Watson says, all right, no nuts. How about a cherry? And then I say, sure. I'll have a cherry on top. And Watson finally says, great, a cherry on top. Will that be all? And I say, that's all for today. And Watson tells me, any second here, that you will be able to pick up your ice cream sundae soon. But back over here with user 2, it asks me if I'd like a cherry on top. And let's just say that user 2 doesn't like cherries really either. So he says no. And so Watson, any second now, should reply with, all right. Just a sec. All right, no cherry. Anything else? And I finally say, that'll be all. And Watson should finally reply with, any second now, right there. Great, you'll be able to pick up your ice cream sundae soon. And the conversation has ended. The context variables have been cleared from Node.js over here, and Node.js is ready to help some more customers. But of course, this Node.js can really support as many simultaneous messages as you could send at it, really. Really, whatever your limit is with Twilio, however many credits you have with Twilio, Node.js should be able to adjust accordingly. And so now, though, without any further ado, let's go straight into an explanation of the code of this application itself. Let's get to it.
Alright, so welcome back to the code part, and now I'm going to be showing you how you can actually code in this application. So to begin, we have to set up our 3 main blocks: Twilio, Watson Conversation, and of course, last but not the least, we have to set up our server, Node.js. So we're going to be setting up Twilio now, then we'll set up Watson Conversation, and then we'll set up our Node.js server. So let's actually begin by setting up Twilio. So as you can see, what I've gone ahead and done is I've gone over to Twilio.com. And on Twilio.com, I've actually signed up for an account and registered a phone number for free. And this is my Twilio phone number over here. And so basically, I can just do this really quickly. And so basically the point is over here that I've registered this Twilio number, and in the settings for this Twilio number under configure, what I've gone ahead and done is when a message comes in, I've actually set that to a webhook, and I've set this to HTTP, then my server's IP address, port 3000, and then the endpoint SMS sent. And so this is the endpoint this is basically the server that it'll call, or the API that it'll call, right as a message comes in from any phone number to this Twilio phone number. So once it actually calls this, and by the way, this endpoint over here is actually running on the Node.js server. So right as it actually finds this and right as it actually sends this HTTP GET request, what's going to happen is that server is then going to be able to receive the information about the message that was just sent in, including who sent the message, and of course what they actually sent. And so, just before I actually get into the actual Node.js part though, let's talk a little bit about the Watson conversation end. Now I'm going to have this Watson workspace available as a download in the description below and on the GitHub source page for this entire project. And so once that's up there, you can of course download this Watson workspace and import it into your own Watson, I guess you could say, workspace. And so another thing really quickly, as you can see, we've got a few intents here, mainly the greeting, no, yes, options, done, flavor, size large, medium, and small. This is actually quite similar to my older conversation video where I told you how to create a pizza helper chatbot, but instead this time we're using an ice cream sundae. Of course, in terms of entities, we've only got flavor, which would be chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla. In terms of dialogue, we've got quite some dialogue in terms of the greeting, the small, medium, and large sizes, the flavor, if you try to select a flavor, what's going to happen then. Of course, we've also got some dialogue for done, so this is basically how the dialogue works. Of course, I'm not going to be going into too much detail about how this dialogue works and the flow of the entire dialogue, because that's an entirely separate video tutorial, and in fact, I've already created it, and as I said, there will be a link to that in the description. However, for now, I really want to focus on how you can actually send SMS and receive SMS using Watson Conversation and Twilio. So, now, let's actually head over to our Node.js server, where I'm going to be showing you the Node.js code that goes behind all of this working. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to go to iTerm here, and I'm just going to do this really quickly. So if I set this up, unfortunately macOS Sierra doesn't allow me to do this any other way, but let's continue here. So basically the point of this code here is to receive your SMS messages, send those to Watson, and then Watson will send us results back, and those results we can then send to you. Okay, so let me actually explain a little bit about how this code actually works. So as you can see, plain Node.js code over here, we're basically importing Express and the Watson Conversation API from the Watson Developer Cloud package that I installed using the Node Package Manager, or NPM. Of course, I'm creating a new application called var app, and this is equal to a new express. But of course, we're creating an array called contexts, and this will contain all the context variables along with the phone number that they're attached to. This array will contain those. But then we're telling our Express.js application to register the endpoint SMS sent, and the SMS sent endpoint, as I said, will be contacted by Twilio whenever Twilio wants to, or really whenever you send a message to Twilio. So these three lines of code over here, what they do is they try to understand what's actually happening here. They understand what you sent, what your number is, and what Twilio number you actually sent that message to. And the reason we gather this information, this Twilio number, is so that we are able to reply to your number using this Twilio number, which is the exact same number that you sent a message to. Once that's done, we're going to start going into the context logic. And the context logic, essentially, these few lines of code, they say that, okay, let's just say that the current context for this phone number is null. We start off with null. Then what we do is we check whether or not this phone number has previously contacted us and has a context variable in contexts. If it does, it'll set the context variable to that array element, that context variable specifically. However, if it doesn't exist, context will remain null and it will not be sent to IBM Watson. But once we're done, with the logic for the context, we then console log in order to tell me that we've received a message from this phone number saying this message, so that we know what's coming in to our, of course, server, or Twilio specifically. But once that's done, we then initialize a new conversation variable. And this conversation variable is equal to a new conversation v1, which is a class defined in the Watson Developer Cloud library. Basically, we're setting the username here to my Watson Conversation username, and my password to my Watson Conversation password, and we're setting this to the latest, at the time of recording, date for IBM Watson Conversation, specifically the trained models that they provide. Once that's done, I print out the context and how many context variables there are. This is just, debugging code. We technically don't need this anymore. I was just using this in order to debug an error that I was getting a little while ago. But, it's always handy to see all the information that's going on in the back end, because why not? And then, finally, what we're doing is we're actually sending IBM Watson Conversation that message that you just sent. In fact, what we're doing is we're sending the input to Watson Conversation as the message that you sent when you sent the SMS that you sent to Twilio. And this message contains that string. Of course, we're giving Conversation our workspace ID, and again, link to that JSON file will be in the description below. And finally, we're setting the context. Now remember, the context can be null, or context can be full of stuff. We don't know yet, but it depends on whether the user has contacted us previously. If they have, then there will be something in context, or else it'll be null, and then Watson will give us some context to put into that variable. Again, if you'd like to know more about what I'm actually talking about in terms of context, you can actually see a video tutorial of mine that essentially helps you create a time-tailored chatbot that uses the IBM Watson context variable, and a link to that will be in the description below as well. Now, once IBM Watson gets back to us with either an error or response, we check whether it got back to us with an error or response, because it could be both. But if it got back to us with an error, we console log or console error that error. And so what happens is, if there's an error, we just don't do anything. We basically don't do anything. We don't reply to the user, and we just print out the error. But if there was a response from IBM Watson, then in that case we continue. And basically when we continue, what we're doing is we are logging out the response that Watson gave us, the first response that Watson gave us. And once we have that response, what we do is we say, okay, check if context is null. If the user has never contacted us before. If context is null, that means that this is the first time we're going to be giving our application some context from Watson. And so what happens is, once we've checked that, we know that there's nothing in the contexts variable that contains the current conversation context. And so we push in a new object, a JSON object. And this JSON object contains a key called from, and the value of this key is number. Okay, and the number variable is your phone number, the phone number that sent the message. And of course, the context key contains the context that Watson responded to us with, more specifically, response.context. But if context was not equal to null, and that means that contexts already contains some older context, then we just want to update that context to the newer one. So we go into that contexts array, and we find our specific context index, which is the current context of the conversation, and we set that context to the context that IBM Watson replied to us with as our updated context. Once that's done, though, once we're done all that context logic, then we get into some intent logic. And intent logic over here basically means that, okay, what do we do with specific intents? Like, for example, let's just say the user's intent is that they're done ordering their ice cream sundae. That means that they've given Watson their specifications, and Watson now knows what the ice cream sundae will consist of. And so basically what we want to do here is, what we could do is we could have, we could technically order that ice cream sundae. But in this case, I don't have any sort of restaurant ready to do that. So I'm not actually ordering that ice cream sundae just yet. All I'm doing is that I know the user is done talking to Watson, so I remove that context variable from the contexts array, so that if the user text messages Watson once more, or Twilio once more, we start fresh with a new context, because because we know they're not talking about their older order because they've already confirmed that that was their order. And so we know that we don't want to change that anymore, so we cut off that context. And technically, as I said, we could actually order that ice cream sundae if we wanted to. But once that's done, we actually then create a Twilio client. And so this Twilio client will essentially help us in sending our text messages. And so once that's done, we tell the client to actually create a new message. And this will go from the Twilio number that you sent your message to, and it'll go to the number that you sent your message from. So basically we're swapping the from and to. And so we're sending a message to you. And so we also set the body of this message, though, to what Watson responded with. So if Watson responded with, hi, my name's Watson, what size of, sundae would you like? Then this will contain that exact, then that will be the body, and then that will be sent to you as an SMS for you to, of course, use, or for you to, of course, reply to. And once that's done, we have a function that checks if Twilio gave us an error or a confirmation of the SMS being sent. And if Twilio gave us an error, then we just print out the error and do nothing. But if Twilio succeeded, then we do nothing and just wait for the user to respond. And of course, our application will continue just like that infinitely until, of course, there's some sort of error. So that's basically how this code works. So let's actually go through this pipeline once more here. So if I close this over here, so close this, as you can see over here, I've got this server running. Okay, and over here, I've got this Node.JS application ready. And this Node.js application runs an Express.js server on port 3000 on this server. And so what that allows us to do is open up an endpoint called SMS sent. And that SMS sent endpoint is actually called by Twilio when an SMS comes into this specific phone number. That SMS sent endpoint will then contact this IBM Watson conversation chatbot over here, this specific one. And once it contacts that IBM Watson chatbot that's powered by Watson Conversation, and once Watson Conversation returns the result back to us, then that result is sent over back to Twilio through its REST API or through its Node.js SDK, and then we're finally able to send that text message or that response back to user. And that's basically how all of this works. Of course, that was actually pretty interesting, and I know that was actually a lot to explain in such a short amount of time. So now, what I'd like to do is, since this was pretty complicated, if you've got any questions, suggestions, or feedback, you can leave that down in the comments below, or email that to me at tadgymani@gmail.com, or even tweet that to me at tadgymani. And of course, that's going to be it for this video today. So if you really like this video, or you think that this could help anybody else you know, please do consider sharing the video and liking the video as well. Of course, if you really do like my content though, and you want to see more of it, please do consider subscribing to my YouTube channel as well, as it really does help out a lot. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much. Goodbye.